Hey, what's up? This is Alex. Last week, I published a tutorial video after a long time since my latest post. And it's been very heartwarming to see lots of you writing stuff like, welcome back, oh, he's back. And there were a few funny comments saying, wow, this guy's disappeared for like years and it just comes back and it starts the tutorial without addressing it. I honestly thought that wasn't necessary because on this YouTube tutorials channel, I just assumed that people watch these videos because they want to learn stuff. You are here to improve your orchestrations, to improve your music and all the stuff. You are not here to learn about me. So whenever I make orchestral tutorial videos, especially now, I don't really spend so much time talking about myself. There's no point for that. That's not the point of this channel. However, based on the comments I got on the last video, it sounds like some of you want to know what the hell has been going on. And why I disappeared. The short answer is I didn't. I've been here all along. I mean, I moved from place to place, different countries or whatever. There was a period on the channel where I was still in Italy. Then at some point I was traveling around and I moved to London. Then I moved to Prague and I'm still in Prague now. And the reason why you see my backdrop change in my videos sometimes, if you go back in time, you're going to see like, it looks like it's in a different room every time. That when you see the room change, it means like just move to a new place. In any case, what has been going on? I've been here. I've started another YouTube channel, which is far bigger than this one, grew exponentially. The reason why I started another channel and why it took a lot of my time are multiple. One of them is whenever I publish a video on YouTube, there's usually a purpose behind it. When it comes to this YouTube tutorials that I make here, like how to orchestrate the music and stuff, the purpose usually is I want to experiment with things in order to learn more about music. And I also want to help other people feel more confident about their process and get people to make music, because I think inspiring others to do amazing things is good. And a world where more people do what they're passionate about is a world that I would love to live in. So selfishly, when I make a tutorial, I'm just trying to inspire the rest of the world to vibrate at the frequency that I like. So, you know, behind the tutorials, that's the motivation, right? I want to improve on certain things and inspire you. At some point during my tutorial days, I figured that the things that you guys were asking me to cover in my tutorials were things that I was starting to get a bit less interested in myself. Meaning, how to sound like Hans Zimmer. Like, just make videos about Hans Zimmer. Just you know, he released the Interstellar soundtrack. I want to make music that sounds like Interstellar. He released Dune. I want to make music that sounds like Dune. And I'm like, that's great. I love Hans Zimmer to death, as you probably have noticed in my videos. I really love his music. But the music that he makes represents only a marginal type of music that I like to make, right? So at some point in the tutorial days, when I was very active here, I got to a place where the stuff that you guys wanted from me didn't align with the stuff that I wanted to do myself, 100%. And that's when I started my Alex Moukala music channel. A huge love of mine is video game music. And so I was like, when I make video game music content here in the tutorial channel, people just don't want it. You guys complain, too much Final Fantasy, too Hans Zimmer. Fair. That's not what you want, but that's not what I want either. So I decided I'm not going to force you guys with what you don't want. I'm going to make another channel where I'm going to talk about video game music a lot more than here. I don't know why my webcam is acting up. And that's what I did. That became Alex Moukala Music, which became my main channel where there's a lot of videos on video game music made for people who love video game music as much as me or more. And the point of that channel is, again, dive deeper in something I want to learn more of, because at that point I wanted to learn more about video game music in order to then become a game composer. And throughout the years on that channel and other places, I started to develop an audience and started to get in touch with people who love video game music and composers of video game music, brands, etc. I started to play bass and do interesting bass remixes of game music that led me to play bass live in front of 40,000 people at an official Final Fantasy XIV concert with Final Fantasy XIV's composer, who invited me to play on stage with his band for one song. That happened. And, you know, if you guys know me at all, being involved in Final Fantasy music in any capacity, even just playing on stage in front of so many people, is one of the dreams I've always had. and it was a life-changing experience. So that happened. I also started making music for some very cool video games. One that came out recently is a game called Contra Operation Galuga. I wrote a piece of music for that one. There's a game called Rift of the Necrodancer, which is going to come out soon. I wrote several pieces of music for that one. There's another game called Second Stone, which is a fantasy game where I'm writing an entire soundtrack. I wrote some lo-fi music for an official God of War Ragnarok lo-fi album for Sony. So there's a lot of things that have happened in the past few years. Professionally, in terms of my music, there's also a lot of things that have happened in terms of my personal life. Like the moving and stuff. And I spent a fair amount of time trying to just live, because with music, like music is my North Star. I always want to make music, and I want to make music that means something to people. For the longest time, especially when I was making lots of tutorials, I was focusing more on like learning orchestration and learning production and learning the technical aspects of music production for orchestral instruments or whatever. And that is a fundamental part of my sound and something that I'm very interested in. And it's like the way I approach music and orchestral music itself has changed drastically since I made those tutorials also, which is very funny and interesting. Some things have improved, some things I started to understand are not so important or whatever. But one thing that happened is that when I reached a certain level of quality with what I was able to do technically with my orchestrations, I started to feel that the next step for me personally would not be to figure out how to make the next big string sample library sound better. The next step for me was not figuring out what are the best free orchestral libraries, what are the best string libraries, best brass, best choir, or whatever. But the next step for me personally in my own growth, in my own career, my music, was to figure out how to make music that means more to people. Music that has more human value, that is more meaningful, more touching, and that can tell a story more. Tell stories of a different kind, not just music that is epic and gets people hyped up, but music that does something extremely specific. I started to really ask myself, like, why are people super into bands like Muse? How can you tell a story through lyrics? How can you tell a story through vocals? How can you make people move by writing a song with just one instrument? How can you synthesize experiences you had in your life and turn them into a musical piece? Well, a lot of these things have to do with living. And living doesn't have to do with like sitting in front of the AW and figuring out how to orchestrate, that's an important skill to have, but I think living a life that is rich is also very important as well for making music that is meaningful and touching. And so in this past few years, I spent some time, just living, traveling. Moving to Prague was a great idea for that, because Prague in Czech Republic is a whole new country, and I've seen things here that I have not seen anywhere else. I've delved deeper on certain aspects of the world that I didn't consider that much before, even just like walking around nature. That sounds so boring, right? But these things, these experiences and all this stuff ends up influencing your music, because it's just new parts of life you're experiencing. And from those experiences, you can draw from, right? And that does something for the music you write. So these past few years, I've also been doing that. Doesn't mean that I've been doing like digital nomad and going around 7,000 countries. No, I just haven't been around many countries, been around just a few. But I've lived more. I met more people, relationships and whatever. And to be fair, it's not like I sat down and I was like, yeah, I need to do all these things in order to get my music to sound better. Like these things, I just did them. And then in retrospect, now I can tell, oh, this inspired me to do this and this led me here. Like playing bass and learning bass led me to play music on stage at the Final Fantasy concert. But when I started to play bass, I didn't do it because I wanted to get there. I just did it because it felt like it was calling to me and it was something that I was very interested in. It had nothing to do with what I was famous for. Many of these things that I spent time doing had zero correlation with what I was known for, what my audiences wanted me to do. I just felt like I wanted to do those things to get me to a place where those things are part of my life. I was just following my interests, and sometimes not knowing why or how those interests would improve my life and my career, but they did. Oftentimes they did. I spent these past few years doing loads of weird shit that sometimes I didn't do correctly. Spent those years being wrong about stuff and learning how I was wrong and improving. I just spent these past few years just doing shit. That's how it can be summarized. But to be fair, it's not like I disappeared from the grid. If you stopped seeing my videos, maybe it just means that I was doing things that you're not interested in. Because if you were interested in the things I was doing, you would have seen those. You would have seen all the video game music analysis videos I made, all the remixes, all the arrangements, the original music inspired by games. You would have seen all the posts on Twitter. You would have heard news of me. The fact that you never heard from me means that I started to take on a journey that doesn't involve things you are personally interested in. And it's fine if you don't follow that. But at the same time, it's also fine if I don't try to force you to be like, hey, I exist. Check out these cool things I'm doing that you're not interested in. I just decided if they like what I do, they will find it, they will follow it. If they are not interested, they won't find it. I hope they're still going to be doing fine. There's other people making tutorials on YouTube. A channel I really like is from a woman called Anne Catherine Dern. I don't know if you follow her. You should. She's great. She's a film composer and game composer, and she makes educational videos, and her perspective is very interesting, oftentimes very different from mine. She talks about things that I've never even considered, and watching her videos is leading me to learn a lot of things. Daniel James is another who's very great at making like educational videos, and it's so entertaining. And what I like about Daniel James a lot is that he gives you confidence in yourself, because when he makes videos, it's just being himself and just creating stuff that sometimes doesn't end up sounding like a huge, amazing, incredible production, and sometimes it's the best thing ever, but it's just there. He's like, this is the creative process, you just do it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And I love Daniel James for that. He's very, he's very inspiring in him just being himself. There's loads of people who make great videos, and when I'm absent, I'm just hoping that you can be in their hands and they can like help you where I can't, because I'm busy living and just doing stuff that has nothing to do with orchestral music that much, or film music in the way you want to learn it. But sometimes I stumble upon a technique or something, and I'm like, yeah, I should make a video about this. And I just pop back in and I make a video, and then I disappear for a year. But if you're asking yourself the question if I'm fine or not, I am. I'm not burned out. I'm still creating a lot. I'm just creating stuff that maybe doesn't fit the scope of this channel or the interests of people who follow this channel. But if you Google Alex Moukala, you're going to find stuff for sure that I'm doing, that I may not be doing. Right now, I'm working on those video games that I mentioned before, and video games involve many years of work, NDA work, which you cannot talk about until you're done and the game is out. So there's a lot of things I'm doing in the shadows, which I may talk about in a few years. And that's also part of the process. You know, when you're a content creator, there's this feeling of like, you need to post every single time, every week or something. And if you don't, you're going to disappear. But I don't think that's sustainable. If you it is sustainable in a way, but if you really want to dive into your creativity in the best way possible, in my opinion, you should do what bands, do or used to do a lot more in the past, which is, or even, people who write books do, which is like, what you create an album or you create a book or something, and before you make the next one, usually there's a period of research, where you just live. Maybe you're on a tour and you're playing music around people, you meet people and stuff, and then you get new ideas because you just spend a year not making music, and then suddenly you have a year of experiences, and now you can create a new album because you have so much material to start from. People who write books usually have this phase where they just go around the world and they do research on the topic they want to write books about. Musicians, composers, in our case, like, you may want to spend 3-4 months learning new instruments, or downloading a new library and learning it inside out, and a library that has nothing to do with instruments you've used before. Whatever. Honestly, I'm just rambling, but I'm just saying that when content creators disappear, it doesn't mean they're not doing anything. Maybe it means they're doing some internal research and learning about the world, learning about themselves. So then they can create new content that is actually new, and it goes to places that they couldn't have gone to before. Even the way I use FL Studio has changed drastically, so much so that I actually bought a Cubase license. and I made transition very slowly to Cubase because I've reached a point with FL Studio where my approach has changed so much. And I've grown so much in a direction where FL has not grown with me. And so I've reached a point where FL Studio is starting to be a bit of a bottleneck in my production process. And so I'm really considering moving to Cubase, and that's going to change. If I do it, that's going to change my music quite a bit. You may have noticed in the previous video where I am using a weird patcher preset now for making orchestral music. I am not using templates anymore. Every single track I make, I'm just using that patcher instance. And there's several reasons for that. I can make a whole video, it's going to be like half an hour long, explaining all those things. And the reason why I started to change drastically the way I use FL Studio is, again, I spent some time just rethinking things and starting on working on different projects. And the games I'm working on very quickly showed me that the way I was doing things wasn't compatible with where I want to get to, which is I want to write loads more music much quicker, much more creatively, in a much more diverse way. And so I had to ditch my template. And to ditch my template, I had to create that patcher preset. And to create that patcher preset, I had to learn kind of the basics, ultra basics of programming in FL Studio kind of. And, you know, like all these things involve a lot of time spent in front of the computer trying to figure shit out. And all that stuff is not like exciting. It's not social media content that can be scalable and get viral. And it doesn't really, like, I didn't have the answers for a long time. I was still figuring this stuff out. So there's no point to me making videos about it until I know that, hey, I learned something tangible that can help you. So yeah, I'm extremely rambly in this video, as you've noticed. It's because I'm trying to summarize and synthesize years of things that have been going on in 10 minutes. And that's impossible. But this is just my way to tell you, like, it's fine to get off the grid. It's fine to disappear. Most especially, I think, now that like AI music is becoming like a prevalent threat, I think that invites a situation where we want to maybe rethink the way we're making art. And I already had thoughts on AI music back when I was making turtle music a lot. I had this feeling that in the way I was making turtle music myself, I had the feeling that, hey, this is so formulaic that it can be replaced by an AI if an AI ever gets intelligent enough to follow these formulas that I'm following. That's the way I was doing turtle music at the time. Doesn't mean everybody else is doing it like this. But me having that thought about how my music at the time was easily replaceable by an AI who had the right formulas, that led me to be like, I need to change things up. And that's kind of when I started the orchestral tutorial channel, because I wanted to learn how to make orchestral music with a level of depth that would be a bit more unique and not so easily replaceable. That's been the guiding principle behind the tutorials, right? And then I got to places where I wanted to make less tutorials and do other stuff and live and whatever. But, I think right now is a good time to maybe spend a bit less time thinking about, okay, which string library should I buy next? And spend more time thinking about how can I write music that means more to people, that is more human, more unique, more evocative, less replaceable, more me, And I don't know if that's the way for everybody. This is just the journey that I'm on right now myself. Doesn't mean that everybody needs to be on that journey either. That's another thing of content creators. Just because there's a content creator you follow and you like him, and you want to be like them maybe, or you want to get the success they got, it doesn't mean that you have to do what they're doing now. Like Hans Zimmer comes to mind again. Like Hans Zimmer, one of the most prevalent composers in our field, he became one of the biggest composers not by doing what everybody was doing at the time when he moved to LA. When Hans Zimmer moved to LA with his new sample libraries and everything, the LA composers I think they were still working with pen and paper a lot. Hans Zimmer was the weird, I wouldn't say underdog, but he came from London with his new technological way of making music, and his approach was not normal at the time. He just revolutionized things by just being different and being on his own journey that was slightly different from everybody else's. So when I see people wanting to sound exactly like Hans Zimmer, I'm like, you're missing the point. The way to become the next Hans Zimmer is to not try to It's not trying to be Hans Zimmer, but it's trying to, you know, add your own contribution in a way that maybe other people don't see coming. And you really have to, you know, really have to dive deep in your own weird interests and quirks and your own history. I mean, Hans Zimmer came from, if I'm not wrong, pop music and then became a composer. I guess at the time that wasn't that common. I think even like Danny Elfman is another. Danny Elfman, one of the most groundbreaking composers of all time. He, before scoring his first big movies, he was part of a band. Maybe, I don't know if he left, but anyway, before he became very famous as a composer, he was mostly known for his band Oingo Boingo, you know. So, you know, this guy came from a band background, ended up revolutionizing Hollywood because he was coming at it from a perspective was entirely different. So just because a famous content creator you like is doing something doesn't mean you should do it too. Just because you have a composer you like a lot, it doesn't mean that you need to sound exactly like them. You know, you can surely learn from them. I've learned a lot from Hans Zimmer. And God, like, I don't think my music would be the same or would even exist without him. But I don't think there's value for me in trying to be exactly like him, because then I'm just going to be the second best. Not even second best. I'm going to be like the 10,000 best because everybody's out there trying to sound like him. So with AI music and stuff being prevalent, I'm starting to think more about how can I make my own music mean something more on a human level and just be a bit more interesting in what I'm doing now, you know? And that's leading me to consider all other things that have nothing to do with this YouTube channel. As the world evolves, I really find myself spending a fair amount of time asking myself, how can I evolve in a way that is interesting, you know? And still stands out, kind of. How can I improve my career and reach out to new avenues and stuff? And that may lead me to kind of disappear from who I was yesterday to become a new me tomorrow. Doesn't mean I don't want to make tutorials anymore. I fucking love teaching. You know, I really love inspiring the world, inspiring you guys to make music and all that stuff. And I love learning. So there's honestly hundreds of things that I could make tutorials about, which I learned in the past few years. I don't always have the time to make videos. I don't even know where I found the time to make this one. I might not edit it because of that reason. But yeah, I hope that answers the questions. Where the hell have I been? I'll see you guys. Bye.